I'm supposed to talk about the book, and the book says lots of things, but I thought I should, I can't speak 45 minutes about this book, but I chose to speak about things which are relevant today in our context. Political context, social context, religious context, and generally our lives, the sort of life we are living in. And it's not about just about India, but South Asia and other parts of the world as well. Maulana Azad, as the word Maulana indicates, was a religious scholar, Islamic scholar, born in a family which was a family of scholars. His own father was a great Islamic scholar and Sufi. One thing which is not known about him is that he was actually a Delhi wala. That very few people know. His family belonged to Shahjahanabad, where they migrated to Arabia, not Saudi Arabia, Arabia. It was not Saudi Arabia till then. And this is again a very, in passing I can say, Saudi Arabia is the only country in the world which is named after the founder. Ibn Saud was the founder of New Arabia, which is Saudi Arabia now. It was just Arabia at those times. Then Maulana and his family reached there. Maulana was born there. His father was a great influence on his life because he was a man with Sufi leanings, and those Sufi leanings were not also Chishti Sufi leanings like Moinuddin Chishti or Nizamuddin Auliya, which is a very relaxed sort of Sufi word. He belonged to a Qadiriya Naqshbandi Sufi order, which is very puritanical, which has lots of do's and don'ts. So Maulana Azad was born in that sort of family. Maulana Khairuddin, his father, married an Arab woman. It's known that she was his teacher's daughter. Some accounts say that she was his teacher's niece, but whatever it is, that's not important. She had some relation with the teacher of Maulana, who was also a great scholar himself. Maulana lived there for 8 years, 7 years, some accounts say 7 years, some 8 years. So Arabic was his mother tongue almost. Then his father, who had lots of murids, followers, as a Sufi, he had lots of followers in India, particularly in Calcutta. So he used to come to Calcutta very often. And one of those rich people in Calcutta, who was his great admirer, follower, asked him to migrate and come to India. He wanted to come back, and he said, come back to Delhi, come to Calcutta. We will look after you as your muris, as your followers. And finally he decided in 1908 to come back to India. And Maulana Azad's age was maybe around 8 or 9 years when he came. There's a discrepancy in accounts. What was his age, but he was very young in those days when he came. Now, very significant thing about his life is that he was some sort of a prodigy, because his father never allowed him to join any school, any madrasa, any university later on, because, and this is important to know in today's Islamic world particularly, why? His father lived in Arabia when Wahhabi Islam was on the rise. Wahhabism, extreme form of Islam, was on the rise. And the whole Arab world was controlled by the Ottoman Empire, Ottoman rulers. Ottoman Islam was Darwishi Islam, Sufi Islam. which was against the Wahhabi upsurge. Maulana's father was used by the Ottoman Turks as a scholar to write against Wahhabism, to speak against Wahhabism, which he did. So he imbibed a certain antipathy towards Wahhabism, which he wanted his son to keep away. So when he came here and he was looking for teachers in a madrasa, he said, I'm not sure about the madrasas. They may teach anything to my son. So he did. So he taught him at home himself. Then he found a teacher. Teachers were interviewed by him. Many of them were rejected and some of them were selected. So this was the beginning of Maulana Azad's life. So he was totally home, taught, educated, no certificate, no degree. But that doesn't mean that he was actually an uneducated man. At the age of 12, he had almost finished his education, which was supposed to be the curriculum in those times, Dars-e-Nizamiya as they used to call it. At the age of 15, he began publishing his own paper called Lisan-ul-Sidq, Voice of Truth, in English. And that paper became very hugely popular in Urdu reading population of Lahore. And his reputation as a scholar, as a writer, as a journalist, because he began as a career, his career as a journalist. This is how many of our freedom fighters began their careers as journalists or as lawyers. 80-90%. If you look at the profile, most of them. So Maulana was also one of them. So he was a journalist, a very somebody who wrote very strongly against imperialism. Later on, 7-8 years later, he founded, in 1912, he founded a paper called Al-Hilal, which was a totally political platform, where Maulana's writings were full of anti-imperialist sentiment. He was not talking about imperialism and its impact in India. Imperialism everywhere. The whole of Islamic world was controlled by imperialists. Other parts of the world were under European control. So he was speaking against imperialism in most of his writings. Obviously, he was more concerned about India, but he spoke generally about fighting imperialism. And I'm saying this because he became so important through his journalistic writings. Till then, he was not part of the Communist Party. He was not in the freedom struggle. He was not even involved in any political activity. He was only a journalist who was fighting the British through his pen. Now, the British got so enraged by his writings that he was threatened that your paper will be seized, which they did. In 1915, Al-Hilal was closed. Then he began another one called Al-Balagh from Calcutta. That also worked for 6 months. That also was seized. Finally, the British sent him into exile out of Calcutta to a place in Jharkhand, today's Jharkhand, near Ranchi, in a village, remote village where he had no contacts with the outside world. And the records in the archives, when you see in the file which I saw, they speak about him. The British intelligence reports talked about him, that he is one of the most dangerous people in India for the British Empire. So he became one of the most dangerous persons only because of his so-called seditious writings, the way he spoke strongly against the British. So he remained in exile for 3 years. So this is how he began his career. The whole, when he was there from 1916 to 1920, January 1920 he came out of exile. In this period, lots of activities were happening in the country. Khilafat movement was going on. Champaran had happened. Gandhi had arrived in 1915 in India from South Africa. So things have changed. When Maulana Azad comes out, He meets Gandhi for the first time in January 1920 in Mumbai, in Bombay. And when he meets Gandhi, the first reaction of Gandhi was that I was very keen to meet you. I went to Ranchi and I sought permission to see you, but they didn't allow me to meet you. And I'm so happy that now I'm meeting you. And this was a bond which lasted till Gandhi died, till Maulana died. He remained with his ideals till 1958. Now, this is the beginning of his career as a journalist and as a politician. Now, when he comes into the Congress Party in 1920 after meeting Gandhi, just 3 years later, there was a huge crisis in the Congress Party, and I'm talking about this because you can imagine how important Maulana Azad as a negotiator, as a man with a powerful voice, the way he was perceived. The Congress Party was facing a crisis. There was almost virtually a split in the party between no changers and pro changers. People who wanted to fight the assembly elections, people who didn't want to fight the assembly elections. So this was a split going on. Swaraj Party, Motilal Nehru, C.R. Das, they were on the one side, there were others on the other side. Maulana Azad was requested to chair a special session in Delhi in 1923. And he was just 35. Till today, he is the youngest president of the Congress Party, even now. And he was just 3-year-old in the Congress Party. Joined in 1920 and became Congress president in 1923. His speech in 1923 as the president of the Indian National Congress is extremely important because he speaks about things which I will refer to later on. He talks about nationalism. He talks about, and this is important in today's context, what we have done to nationalism, how we have defined nationalism today, how we have, our nationalism today is so exclusivist. It just leaves out a large section of our own fellow citizens. Anyway, we are all watching that. But he spoke of nationalism as a hugely cohesive force which can bring together people across religions. And one important thing which he said, which is quoted by lots of people, I have also quoted in my book. He says, if an angel descends from the heaven and lands on the Qutub Minar and gives a call from there that give up the fight for freedom and forget about Hindu-Muslim unity, we will give you freedom. The British will give you freedom. I am not going to accept that sort of freedom. For me, Hindu-Muslim unity is more important than freedom. We can wait for freedom. Once this unity, this cohesiveness, this togetherness disappears, then we cannot bring people together. So that will be my last choice. So this is something which, this was a sentiment of that whole speech which he spoke over there in 1923 in Delhi. Later on, there are lots of other things which one can talk in this context, but I will not because I have to say other things. This is like in 45 minutes I can't touch upon everything. Other things which people generally don't know about Maulana Azad are issues like things which he, we can go back to his childhood for a while, early years of his life. Things which he learned from his father and things which he unlearned from his father. Lots of things which he learned because history teaches you not just to follow what history has taught you. There are lots of things in history which you have to forget, which are not relevant, which need to be ignored. And Maulana did exactly that. He did not go along the inherited which in Urdu and Arabic is called taqleed. Taqleed means inheritance, things which you have inherited from the past. So he didn't follow the inherited Islam, and I am talking of it because it is more important in today's context of Islam also. What sort of Islam Maulana Azad left for the believers? He questioned the faith of his own father. He was not supposed to talk in front of him. They were all awed by his presence. He was such a larger-than-life figure. But Maulana silently, as a child, started protesting. His father decided to declare Maulana Azad as a successor, as a peer after him. And Maulana said, I am not interested. I just don't want to follow the Islam you want, you follow. I hate the sight of people who come and kiss your hands, who come and touch your feet. I don't want those sort of followers. I understand that. My Islam doesn't teach me that somebody should come and kiss my hands. Why? So he disagreed with his father on this and distanced himself from that Islam which he inherited from the family, from his father. Now what happens? He comes to a stage where his antipathy towards Islam takes an extreme form. He almost gives up, and he has written about it. He gives up praying. He can't observe Ramadan. Then I find all this meaningless. Till I understand what all this means, till I read the Quran, till I understand, till I define Islam for myself, and I am convinced that what Quran says is worth following, only then I will do. And he lived almost for a year and a half without faith. And in that period, he did lots of things, and people actually charged him with all sorts of observations. The scholars of Islam in those times, one of the very well-known Islamic scholars, Sulaiman Nadwi, wrote about him that he is actually like a flower which has no fragrance. So that was the sort of antipathy towards him, because nobody agreed with what he. It was something very radical to do in those times. You can't do even now, and he did that in those times, and he wrote about them in those times. So Maulana Azad faced all this, went through this phase, and after that he comes back to Islam, which he says that this is a refurbished Islam. This is an Islam which has come to me with reason, with independent thinking, with istihad. Istihad is independent thinking. And this is all what Quran allows me to do. While the Islam which my father wanted to pass on to me had the doors closed for all this. And when I read Quran, I see that Quran actually depends on reason. Quran says, and the Prophet said in his hadith, so many hadiths, that I am leaving behind Quran and giving you mind to think. And Maulana says that today, unfortunately, people have locked their minds and they have their book. If you lock your mind, then you can't understand the book. So this is what Maulana felt, that I want to keep my mind open, read the Quran, understand it the way I think I should understand it, interpret it. And so he goes back to this Islam, which was very different from what his father wanted to pass on to him. Now, this is something important in today's context as well. Fortunately, today's Islamic world, everywhere, there is so much emphasis on Hafiz al-Quran. Hafiz means, Hifz means to cram, to just cram up what Quran says, of ayat of Quran, without understanding. So, Hafiz al-Quran and Alim al-Quran, they are two different things. Alim means who understands, who knows the ilm behind the Quran, who understands what the Quran actually says. So this is what Maulana emphasized. He said, I don't want Hafiz al-Quran to thrive. I want Alim al-Quran. I want Muslims to actually read Quran, understand it, and then decide for themselves what Quran actually says. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen. And I have decided in the book on this issue with him because he could make this statement because he belonged to a privileged family. He had Arabic as his mother tongue. Quran is a book which has come to the believers in Arabic. Obviously, those who can't understand Arabic, that is true for Hinduism as well. Lots of shlokas, hardly any Hindu actually understands. How many people understand it? They only recite. So all these religions take advantage of people because they don't want to vernacularize these texts. Quran again is hardly vernaculized. Urdu editions are hardly popular. There are translations, but hardly read. That is not something religious to do for a Muslim, to read Quran in Urdu or Hindi or English. Somebody who wants to be a scholar, want to learn something about Islam, who is not a believer, can read the Quran in English, doesn't matter. But a believer will only read Quran in Arabic, whether he understands it or not. That's not the issue. So that is something which Maulana tried to raise. That read Quran, try to understand it in any other language. That has not happened. Vernaculization has not happened because Arabic became a language of Quran, became sacrosanct. It is still seen as that, which has caused a lot of trouble for the faith, for the believers themselves, which Maulana warned in early 20th century. And he himself, which I will talk later on, he himself translated Quran into Urdu just because of that, which is called Tarjuma al-Quran. He could not finish it, he just did partly, published in 1930. That also when he was in prison in Meerut jail, 1930, that's where he finished it. The whole process of translation also went through a huge ordeal because he attempted to translate the Quran in 1916-17. The British raided his house, took away all the manuscripts and destroyed them. And Maulana was terribly shaken. He started the process again with a heavy heart, raided again, took away the manuscripts again. 2 attempts. Third attempt, Maulana was very, very despondent to make. And then he writes in his Dissing Act, he said, when I read about Carlyle, when Carlyle writes that he was writing about French Revolution, and during the revolution his manuscripts were lost, and he didn't know how terrible I felt. And then Maulana says, I didn't believe when he wrote this. He said, why? You have lost it, you can write again. But when I went through myself, then I realized how awful it is to rewrite what you have already written. So, Tarjuma al-Quran went through this whole process, this ordeal, which the British forced him to go through. But finally, he could finish 18 paras of the Quran, and then later on he could find time. He was part of the political action. So it never happened. It was translated into English soon after by one Professor Muhammad Latif from Azad, and that beautiful translation is available and people can go through it. Now this is something which Maulana did during those times in the early phase when he was not so deeply involved in freedom struggle. Later on, he couldn't really find time. But his emphasis was on reason, against taqlid, against following blindly whatever you have inherited. He wrote several times that you need to question everything. Don't accept everything without raising a question. Question everything, whether it is religion or anything else. Knowledge grows only when you question. whether knowledge is about religion or knowledge is about anything else. So this is something which is full of such sentiments. This is broadly I am saying. I can't get into all the details, but this is what Tarjuman al-Quran speaks about. Like Tarjuman was not just a translation; it was followed by a commentary. So his own commentary goes around, and he places the Quran in the context in which he was living. So that way, it was a live sort of Quran. It was not a dead piece of history, and that's how I talk about history. Whenever I have to speak generally about history, I said I don't believe in dead history. I believe in history which comes alive. There is no point in reading history or understanding history which has no relevance or no context in the times you are living in. You have to locate yourself, or you have to locate history in the period you are talking about. So in both ways, like you have to read history in context, and then that history should be live. You should be able to relate to it. Then only it is relevant and it is worth pursuing. So this is what Maulana tried to do with Quran. He wrote his commentary, which was absolutely contextual. What is happening to Islam? What was happening to Islam in those times? He raised all those questions while he was putting his commentary down. When he was doing it, and this is something which I need to talk about more seriously. When Maulana was engaged in writing or translating Quran, this was a period of 1920s. 1920s was the time, and I have always called 1920s as one of the most important decades for history, particularly our freedom struggle history. Because this is the decade which saw the beginning of the first mass movement of Mahatma Gandhi. It saw the founding of the Communist Party of India in 1925. It saw the founding of the RSS in 1925. It saw the founding of Tablighi Jamaat in the late 1920s. And it saw the surge of labor movement in Gujarat, Maharashtra, on those parts. The first labor movement at a great large scale. So this decade of 1920s, and it also saw the birth of revolutionaries like Bhagat Singh, who did politics, who fought for freedom from a different perspective, and left behind a different ideology, different ideas. And I see Bhagat Singh as an ideologue and an intellectual, not just a martyr or a nationalist, which he was, but was not only a nationalist. A very incomplete way of looking at it. Anyway, so this decade was extremely important. So when Maulana is writing about Tarjuman al-Quran, in 1924, something very significant happens, where there is a book. There are actually a couple of books which come out, which denigrate Prophet Muhammad. Very abusive books produced, which were polemical, engaging with Islam very abusively. And one of the most important books was Regular Rasul, which came out from Lahore. And that book led to a huge reaction from the Muslim population. There were riots in Punjab, in Western UP in particular. There was huge bloodshed, huge hatred, animosity between communities, and Maulana was hugely disturbed. And this is the time when he is writing his Tarjuman al-Quran. So Maulana makes a comment which is significant in today's context of the world, not just India. When you see people in France killing people who are making cartoons, you see that Prophet is being, or Islam is being denigrated by the cartoonists, so you go and kill them. Maulana says that I am disturbed, disgusted with the book which has been published. But I am more disturbed and more disgusted by the followers of the Prophet and followers of Islam. They have no business to go and kill people in the name of their faith. They are not bigger than Prophet Muhammad. They are not bigger than Allah they follow. How can they take any initiative to defend the Prophet on his behalf and kill somebody? So Maulana was deeply embraced and he wrote extensively about it, very openly, very categorically, which is, I'm raising this because it is so relevant today. It happens, it is happening now only within Islam, it is happening with the other faiths also. Hinduism was not the way Hinduism is today. It was so different. It was so different from Islam. Now it wants to become the mirror image of Islam, the religion they hate. So this is something which is terrible, which is actually destroying religions, Hinduism or Islam, whatever. Islam has been facing this for years, and I have been very critically writing about it. I have written a book also about this aspect of Islam called Jihad or Istihad. It came out long back. But issue is that one has to keep your critical faculties in place. If you block your brains and follow whether it is political ideology or religion, it is true for all. No, it's like whether it is Marxism, if you are dogmatic, if you are a dogmatic Marxist, then also you are a problem for the society. If you are a dogmatic believer of Hinduism or Islam, you are a problem. So dogmatism, extremism of any variety, whether in political ideology or religion, is a cause for concern. And Maulana Azad raises these issues in 1930s, which are relevant for us even now, if we care to follow. Unfortunately, Maulana Azad is not even part of the NCERT curriculum, and I wrote about it somewhere in the piece. So he has been thrown out of the NCERT political science syllabus. He is not even taught. And people say all sorts of things, write all sorts of things, make YouTube channels, programs about him, very derisively, without even bothering what are they doing. So this is something which we are doing to his legacy which he tried to question, the legacy he inherited. Unfortunately, we are doing exactly the same to his legacy. We are not even bothered to understand what he has left behind, whether it is nationalism or Islam or anything else. Now his whole career, and I am not talking about chronologically political profile, because that I have not followed in the book as well. I'll just go back and forth. And his understanding of Islam and understanding of nationalism are related, and he explains it. He actually writes an article in 1927 when Al Hilal, his paper was actually closed, then he brought out the paper again, the second series, and wrote a longish article called Islam and Nationalism. And this is something very interesting, and in the book I have dealt with the whole idea got a detail, where he says that in India, the Muslim League, they are trying to create a nation in the name of religion, on the basis of two-nation theory. They believe that Hindus and Muslims can't live together. There are two nations in one India. Two nations can't exist. And actually, it was not just Muslim League. It was Hindu Mahasabha also saying exactly the same thing in the same times. The 1937 address of Veer Savarkar is exactly the same thing. He says Hindus and Muslims are two nations. They can't live together. This is exactly what Muslim League was trying to say. So the communalists of all varieties work together on these issues. And people like Maulana Azad, Gandhi, Patel, Nehru, all of them together were actually not just fighting the British, they were fighting these communal forces as well. So there was a three-pronged battle. Fight the British, fight the communal forces, Hindus and Muslims. So it was a terrible situation where you have to fight not only the British, but you have to fight your own people who don't agree with the whole idea of your composite nationalism, your togetherness, your indivisible nationalism, your empathetic nationalism, different names which I have given in my anthology of nationalism, which I did a couple of years ago, Indian nationalism. So, so these are all different names one can give. But communalism of any variety, Hindu or Muslim, communalism cannot peddle itself as nationalism. It cannot. And it was not during British times, and it cannot be even now. Because the nationalism, Islamic nationalism of Muslim League divided the country. Its objective was to divide the country. That's what they wanted. Hindu communalism weakened the nationalism, the mainstream nationalism. Because it did things which, and this Maulana wrote that I can understand the objective of the Muslim League. I know they want to divide the country. And there is no doubt about that. We are all fighting. But I am surprised that why Hindu communalists are raising these issues now when we are fighting a battle against the British. If you raise communal issues now, instead of fighting the Muslim League, you fight your own people who are trying to talk about composite nationalism. There are a large number of Muslims who are with us, and this is again a misnomer. People say that Muslim League, all Muslims were. This is something which is raised again and again these days. People forget that in 1940, and I should refer to this and then I will shift to other things in a few minutes. In 1940, the Muslim League decided for a two-nation theory, declared Pakistan as their objective in their session. In 1940, Maulana Azad was elected Congress president at Ramgarh session. He delivered a historic presidential address, which is worth reading, which is very poetic. He delivered it in Urdu, and Nehru translated it into English, which is such a poetic literary piece. Everybody should read it. Very beautiful. Besides these two things, third thing happens, which very few people know in the same period. In 1940, in this city, Delhi, Azad Muslim Conference was organized, and I have referred to it in detail in my book, which was headed by Allah Baksh Samru, who was a Sindhi leader. He was the president of this Azad Muslim Conference. When the conference was organized here, and the conference was organized to condemn Muslim League for its two-nation theory. That was a single point agenda. There were other things said over there. And you will be surprised that this conference was attended by, there are two exhibits in the archival files, that 1 lakh Muslims gathered, another says 75,000 Muslims gathered. They were all Muslims. So it was Azad Muslim Conference. And Muslims of different backgrounds. Obviously, there were not Ashraf Muslims in this. Ashraf, or the haves among the Muslims, were with the Muslim League. The have-nots, the Pasmanda Muslims, were out of it. They didn't see anything very attractive in the Muslim League agenda. The Muslim League was talking about jobs. Your jobs will go, the Hindus will dominate, your businesses will not thrive, the Hindus will dominate once the British go. This was a fear which they were instilling into the minds of the Muslims of those times. But despite this, a large section of Muslims, Iran Party, Quraysh al-Mazgar, and so many others, they all joined together, all day moving conference, they all got together, and more than 1 lakh people gathered in the city, where people spoke openly against the Muslim League agenda. The Muslim League decided to raise black flags to the leaders, but all of them disappeared. When they saw the numbers, nobody came anywhere close. These are all historical records. They are not stories, they are all archival files, or maintained by the British, not by any historian or by Congress Party or by any other political group, by the British. And all records are there in our national archives. So when something like this happens, one can realize that a large section of Muslims were not part of the Muslim League. They were all, people say that Maulana Azad lost the battle. Country couldn't be kept together. It was divided. But I say, and I feel that Maulana Azad was not defeated. he was able to convince a large section of Muslims to decide, who decided to declare India as their home, despite threats to their lives, despite violence happening all around, despite fears being spread by Muslim League. And when you say that a large number of Muslims actually voted for Muslim League in Muslim dominated areas, people don't realize this is something which is spread among people. That there was no universal franchise. Large number of Muslims who were actually not with Muslim League, they had no voting right. It was only the privileged zamindars and the rich people who had the right to vote, among Hindus as well as Muslims. So universal franchise comes much later. So people who are voting for Muslim League were actually privileged people. So that is no indicator. So this is something which need to be told to all those people who spread lies today in the name of this communal politics. That what was happening in those times was certainly very different. And we need to understand our history by reading actually what were the facts on the ground, who did what, and how we can identify the critical features of a profile of people of those times, including Maulana Azad. Now, I think I wish I could continue on this, but I don't want to. There are other things which I thought I will share with you, which normally very few people know. Only those who have read about Maulana Azad, they are aware of it. Mostly people have no idea what was the profile of Maulana Azad as an apolitical person, besides politics. He was arrested from Bombay in 1942. The Quit India call was given. There were 11 people who were with Maulana Azad, all the top leaders. They were all sent to Ahmednagar Fort prison. Gandhi, Sarojini Naidu and Kasturba, they were sent to Pune Kha Palace. And these 11 people, which included Maulana Azad, Sardar Patel, Jawaharlal Nehru, Acharya Narendra Dev, Acharya Viplani, Sayyid Mahmood, and Ravi Darabhaiya. And so there were 11 people, they were all with them together in Ahmednagar Fort prison. Now in this Ahmednagar Fort prison, two very important things happened. One was that Nehru wrote his Discovery of India, which we all know. But Maulana also wrote something here, which was not a book at that time. They were epistolary essays. Like he decided to write a longish essay on some subject to his very senior friend, Habib Sherwani, who used to live in Aligarh, was a Rais and Zamindar, senior to Maulana Azad, but Maulana respected his scholarship and had great regard for him. So he started writing letters to him. The first letter that he wrote, the British said that in this prison, in this sentence of prison, you are not supposed to share any letters outside. So your letters will not be posted. Maulana was very disappointed. He said, okay, doesn't matter. He kept it in the file. Then he started writing. He used to decide a topic, something on anxiety, something on like egotism, some philosophical subjects he will choose and write. And he just kept on writing, and he wrote quite a few of them, and he kept collecting in his file. They were not posted. And in those essays, he wrote about birds as an amateur ornithologist, because he was in the prison and he saw lots of nightingales, sparrows, and their behavior. And this is something very interesting. And he's an amateur ornithologist. He's not even knew how these birds behave, but he used his own skills to understand their behavior. And there are very interesting things, like about the group of sparrows. He writes that one of the sparrows, male sparrow, cock sparrow, was a little hefty, strong one. and used to behave, boss around, bully everybody, and used to behave like a mullah. These are his words. Used to behave like a mullah, as if he's the most important one among the people. And there was another one, very, very cute, very dainty, and he uses the French mademoiselle. Then she was Mademoiselle Sparrow, and was very cute, and all male sparrows used to hang around her. So like he writes a beautiful story about their behavior, about their eating habits, their behavior, their fights, and how he himself tried to push them out of his cell. They were all. He said, "No, I'm actually an intruder. They are residents of this fort much before me, and so I shouldn't complain. Why should I complain? I am an intruder. So obviously they don't like my presence. But anyway, so then he writes about nightingales, and he compares Indian nightingales to Iranian nightingales, and it's a long story about all these birds. Then he writes about flowers, the poppies, all sorts of flowers which have come up over there. The fort was in a very bad shape when they entered, and he writes that some of us decided. Nehru was the first one to decide. He used to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning with his spade and axe and start digging. And within a month, he created a huge flower bed. The whole place, which was so terribly boring, became so lively. And I was actually a very lazy man. I never used to get up, but I loved watching what was happening around me. Sardar Patel was also not very fond of it. He was playing his chess most of the time, or spending time in the library, whatever books he could find in the library. So he writes all these things in these letters, which are extremely important. Now, two important letters which I thought I would talk about, which are not known much. One is Maulana Azad's passion for tea. Like he was one of those people who used to get up at 3 in the morning, 3:30. That was the time he used to get up every day from his childhood. And he has written about it that I get up and do my work when the whole world is sleeping. That is the best time to get up, because the world is sleeping and nobody is there to disturb you. And that's what I have been doing all my childhood. My father used to tell me that it will have an adverse effect on your health, but I never bothered. I have always been like that. So in prison also, he used to get up early morning. The first thing he did was to make his cup of tea. And that tea was Chinese jasmine tea. No other tea. Chinese jasmine tea, which he used to source from Calcutta, because Calcutta had a large number of Chinese shops even in those times, and they all used to arrange for it. So when he went to the prison, he ran out of stock. And so he informed the jailer, who was Mr. Sendek, and Maulana didn't like his name, Sendek. What is this name, Sendek? He said, I will not call you Sendek, I will call you Cheetah Khan. And so his name became so popular that his own staff, the jailer's staff, used to call him Cheetah Khan. So if he was off someday, he said, no, Cheetah Khan is off today. He is not there. So he became Cheetah Khan. So Maulana. So he told Cheetah Khan, Mr. Sendek, that he has to arrange tea for me, because I can't live without tea. People were sent in Ahmednagar, it was a small place, and there was one Chinese shop which has come up in Ahmednagar. When they went there, and lady Sanya, Chinese Sanya's son, his wife, and they were visiting India. There was time that they were supposed to come to Pune or that part. There was news in the papers that when they asked for Chinese tea, they all said, oh, so you are taking it for that VIP you are visiting. So then we will arrange. Anyway, they couldn't arrange anything, but news spread everywhere that the police is searching for tea because there are VIPs coming. And actually he was Maulana Azad. So when he is writing about tea, he writes about the preparation of tea as a great event. There I prepare tea. When the tea is ready, I keep it on the right hand. I keep my papers and my file, my pen on the left, and then pour my first cup into a Russian cup of tea. I don't take tea in normal cups. My tea cups are small, and I'm not one of those crude people who will take just one sip and finish it. I take my time, I relax, and as my tea comes in my cup, I light my cigarette, and I see to it that my tea ends only with the end of my cigarette. None of them should actually finish before. So this is something which he writes in such a great celebration. And then he says, the sort of tea I take, I'm so sorry that I can't invite anybody to have tea with me. Because in India, these British have passed on some leaves which they call tea, and also told them to mix sugar and milk. So they make sharbat, and so I can't even invite anybody. Nobody likes the tea I take. It's only one, Jawaharlal Nehru, who takes some lopchu wopchu. That's the word he uses, which is black. But again, he will not enjoy the tea I have. So he writes lots of other things, but these are few things which are important to know about this aspect of Maulana Azad's life. Then he says, when I get up at 3 o'clock, there is no noise. There is silence all around. Only one noise one can hear from my neighborhood. There is a Jawaharlal sleeping who is snoring. It's only the snores of Jawaharlal Nehru which one can hear. After snoring, he will start talking to himself while he is sleeping. And then he says, because there are people like him who are very emotional. So they talk even in sleep also. They don't even know what they are talking. I can't even understand what he's saying. But he's saying something, which he does every day. This is a routine which I follow at 3 o'clock in the morning when I see my neighbor Jawaharlal snoring and muttering something to himself. So this is something which he tries to explain about his tea and all that, and that whole passion with tea continues from younger times till he died. Another thing which is important is that he talks about, and there is a full letter about this. He says, I can't understand why people like philosophers, men of religion, or men of ethics, they need to be morose, they need to look sad, they need to look serious. Why can't they be jovial? Huh? So this is something which has been accepted by people, that if you are a great scholar, religious scholar or philosopher, you need to be very serious, you need to have a profile which is absolutely morose. And then he quotes André Gide, Nobel laureate from France. He says, this is what André Gide wrote. He said, this expression, morose expression on your face, run down faces, this is not just an issue of a particular person. It is a social issue. If you do this, you actually spread some depression in society. So you are committing a social evil. So you need to be, despite all your problems, you need to be pleasant in public life. So I'm just referring to three things. This is what he writes in detail in the letter in quite a few pages. And the last thing which I thought I should share with you was his passion for music. And this is something which normally people don't comprehend that Maulana Azad, Islam and music, how can they go together? Now, Maulana Azad was a great music lover from a very young age. He once he was actually in Calcutta. He was in a bookshop when he was 12 or 13 years old. And in that bookshop, he found a book called Rag Darpan. Rag Darpan was a translation of a Sanskrit text of music, translated by one Sam Khan. Sam Khan was one of the nobles in Aurangzeb's court. Aurangzeb, who didn't like music, there were people who were still doing music and still writing about music. And so he translated that from Sanskrit to Persian. And Maulana Azad picked up that book, started reading it. While he was doing it, a British principal of a college, Mr. Ross, he comes, who was a Persian scholar himself, and he saw this young boy, reading that serious book on music, turning the pages. He said, "What are you doing? You will not understand. For this, you need to be a musician. You can't understand all this." Maulana Azad was seriously challenged. He said, "Oh." Then he bought the book, went home, got one Ustad, Masida Khan, who was a sitar player, who also wanted to be a disciple of his father, and he requested him. He said, "Your father will kill me if he comes to know that I am teaching music to your son." He said, "No, I will come to your house and you don't have to come here." So which Maulana did for 3 years. He went to his house, spent 3 hours every day for 3 years, learnt music, he became an accomplished sitar player, and then he used to go to Agra on a moonlit night, sit behind the Taj Mahal on the banks of the Yamuna and play sitar the whole night. This is what he has written himself. That I didn't feel like going back home. I used to just spend the whole night playing sitar. So this was a passion which Maulana Azad had all his life. Music was so central. So in this article, he writes about the history of European music, German music, Indian music, Indian classical music, Indian other traditions of Indian music, and then music during medieval India. He said, "What are you saying? Islam doesn't like music, or doesn't approve of music." Look at Mullah Abdul Qadir Badaiyuni, who was one of those very rabid, fanatic counterparts of Abdul Fadl in Akbar's court. He was an accomplished flute player. He used to play flute, Masuri. So how can you say that Islam doesn't allow? And then he goes and gives a whole history, how Prophet played music, how Prophet actually enjoyed music, watching music during his own lifetime. So he's justifying everything in this longish, the longest essay, 24 pages, which he writes about music and its history. So this is something which mostly people don't know. And when he became a minister after independence, Maulana was like, used to listen to All India Radio, and All India Radio, classical music, and he probably felt that the standard is very low. And Sardar Patel was Home Minister and Information Broadcasting Minister at those times. Maulana wrote a letter to Sardar Patel saying that don't see it as an offense or intrusion into your domain, but I want to request you to look into the standards of Indian classical music, which is not very good. The people who are in charge of it, they are not doing a good job. If you don't mind, can you please ask your bureaucrat who is looking after it to come to me, and I will spend some time with him and guide him how to improve. So this is the level of involvement of Maulana Azad when he became a minister after independence. So Sangeet Natak Academy, which he founded, Sahitya Academy, which he founded, Lalit Kala Academy, which he founded, all of them were not just ministerial responsibilities. They all came from within, because he was so involved with art and culture and music that education had no meaning without culture, without art and without aesthetics. This was what he wrote again and again all over in his writing, in his speeches, in his addresses. So this is Maulana Azad, which I thought I should share with you, and this is something which I have done in the book as well. And the book, of course, then in more detail, and I thought I will choose a few things and share with you. I hope you will take back a few things which maybe you have not heard before. Not everything. Thank you.